So good afternoon, everybody. So I've been told that we have 15 minutes less for. So I have a short presentation to introduce the topic, and as well to share with you some of the research that we have been working on. Some of that research is very early research, still small sample, but I wanted to share some of the early outcome with you. I will run through it, so I will not go into very much of the detail. But if you are interested to know more or to have this presentation, please reach out to me. I will be happy to share with you under one condition, and this is that you will participate in our research in return. So, because this is a very important topic, and we want as many owners and various stakeholders to participate to really understand the bottom line of it. So today we will be talking about sustainability or ESG. We do appreciate, with the panel we agreed that we will be focusing on environment. Multiple reasons for this. A, it is first in the alphabet. Second, it does have a major implications on hotel development and retrofit, probably more than the social and governance issues. And third, if we don't solve the environment challenges, we don't have to worry about the social and governance issues. So I think that priority is on the environment. We have limited time, so that will be our focus. We will try to answer two major questions. One is, why is it important from owner's perspective, obviously, and what are the financial implications? So this is the why questions. And then the second part is how. What are the specific examples how you can reduce energy, carbon emissions, water usage, waste, etc. So hopefully we will have some time for that. Before I start talking about money, there is obviously much bigger reason why we should pay attention and dedicate our resources into sustainability. And it is because there is only one planet. And if we don't reverse, and we need to take action now in this decade, because if we don't reverse the trends that are happening now, I think the value of our assets will be one of the last things we will have to worry about. So, this is really important. And we don't want to kind of talk about the money before we actually highlight much bigger problem that we are facing. We talked today about COVID-19 over the last 2 days. I think during the economist presentation, we heard about recession. And obviously those are major issues that owners and investors need to take into consideration. However, there is a much bigger challenge that we are facing, and I'm specifically talking in present time, because I think that this picture, as much as illustrative it is somewhat misleading, because it suggests that climate change is third wave coming. But it's already something that we are experiencing now. Obviously, the floods in Pakistan, the drought, the extreme heat waves, even in Greece, that are being experienced, are the signs of the climate change, and they are affecting the real estate and affecting our society as we speak. So this is not something that is coming from the future towards us. This is something very present, and we need to address it very now. If there is one or two conclusions that I want people to take from this session and presentation is, first, that you must act now, especially the impact on values and on the real estate, on hotels, is something that is not avoidable. The early movers, the pioneers, will manage to maybe increase their value or get some benefit from adopting sustainability in their assets early. But those who will follow will face significant deterioration of the value. So that's one conclusion. The other conclusion I want to send across is that everybody needs to participate. This is not the role of owners or investors to invest. This is operators, regulators, lenders, and of course, the guests need to show through the choice of hotels where they stay, what they require during their stay. They need to contribute to resolving this huge challenge that we are facing. And you can see that there are 5 drivers or stakeholders. On one side is the regulators, operators that implement or push ESG or sustainability measures through the laws and brand standard. And on the right side, you have the finance providers and investors who are now have some minimum requirements when it comes to sustainability, and they speak through their capital that is being deployed. Of course, the most important is all of us, because we elect the governments that then put in place regulations. We demand from our brands, we choose the brands where we stay, and we put our money and savings into banks, and we buy shares of the companies that invest. So ultimately, it's our responsibility to put pressure on all those stakeholders. But let's talk a little bit about the financial impact. I'm sure this is why you are here. So we have done some research. This is actually ongoing research on, so far, not a huge sample of respondents, but we have interviewed major institutional players. So I'm talking about pan-European or global investors, sovereign wealth fund, pension funds, etc. And we asked them a few simple questions. One of them was, do you have sort of ESG or sustainability-related checks and balances or process during your acquisition process? And funny enough, 100% of them said yes. We already have it. We have our investment memorandums, the documents that we're submitting to investment committees. There are some checks that needs to be ticked. Interestingly enough, most of them, as you can see, 62% have implemented this in the last 24 months, actually 18 months. So if I ask this question 2 years ago, the answer would be no, and we are thinking about it. So there has been major shift that happened over the last 18 months. So if you are thinking of selling a hotel today or tomorrow, it's very, very likely that it will be subject of scrutiny from the sustainability perspective. And you might face challenges. And you can see that quite substantial amount of investors have already experienced, 62% of investors experience issues during the acquisition or disposition. Out of that, half of them experienced financial issues, and one quarter of them experienced substantial financial issues, meaning more than €500,000 impact on the value, whether they managed to get the discount on the acquisition or during disposition they were facing requests for reducing the price. So this is actually quite significant. Luckily, if you invest in sustainability of the hotels and you get the highest credentials, you can today, and I believe that this is not going to last forever, so you really need to be early adopter, because investors are willing to pay for rare things, not for common things. So today, very few hotels have the highest sustainability credentials. If you have those, you can actually achieve premium on your asset, and this depends on whether it is opportunistic type of disposition or core disposition, where in core disposition you can get up to 11% of the premium, which again, if you include as well the savings on energy that you get from the operations, plus increase on your value, that makes those investments actually very interesting, right? And I'm really running through it. In addition, there is some openness among the operators. It's not as that great as I would wish, but there is some openness among the operators to what we say, put money where their mouth is. And some of the operators, is not the majority, is minority today, are willing to either waive their technical service fee. Some proportion of that, as you can see, are willing to give more aggressive key money, etc. And some of them, small proportion, are willing to lower their fees when it comes to hotels that have very high ESG credentials. I think this will change over time, and it will change as our guests and people, when they booking, they will actually make it as an important consideration for them. So now the location, the price is the most important, and that's why when you have a hotel in Paris, all operators would run to you and offer you key money and really great fees, etc., because that's what matters to customers, and that's why what matters to operators. However, ESG is rising on that consideration, and I think in time we will see operators to be very keen to adopt or to include sustainable hotels into their portfolio to increase the image of their own network. And you can see that there is already some examples of or surveys that quite substantial amount of travelers pay attention to this. And what is very interesting, for example, that 19% of the travelers have already paid premium. And I think there is an opportunity for STR to actually make this data even more robust, because they have the information. There is possibility to analyze really what premium sustainable hotels can achieve when it comes to occupancy and ADR. Happy to work with them on this. So with that, I'm going to the conclusion. It's all about protecting the value, and I think with time, it's going to be more about protecting the value. But today, you can as well achieve some premium and increase of value, reduce your costs, etc. But with increasing regulation and requirements, this is going to be more and more rare. So if I have one recommendation for owners today, be pioneer, be early adopter, because now you can still offset some of this expense and share it with the customers. They will reward you with higher occupancy and a higher price. You can share it with the lenders because they will give you lower cost of capital, and investors might reward you with higher price for your asset. In the future, that might slowly disappear. So with that, I will invite our experts to the podium. I would start with the lady, Paulina, Godfrey. She's true expert, senior director at Hilton for energy and environment, or environment and energy, if I say it right.
Energy and environment.
Come on stage. Theodor Kubak, who is managing director of investment fund, One Value, and you're actually sitting on 3 chairs, and you are as well co-founder and board member of HAMA Association, so representing on this panel the owner's interest. We have Willem von Bolderen.
Von Bolderen. Yeah.
Bolderen, who is managing director of architectural firm Studio Puisto. Yes. And last but not least, Ivaylo Lefterov, who is managing director as well of hotel development at Svart.
Okay.
So thank you for joining us today. We have limited time, and I will start with Paulina and kind of refer to one of my slides. When it comes to operators, when you are considering hotels to be joining the network, do you consider sustainability features of the hotel? Is that a factor? Are there some minimum requirements where you would say, historically, fire and life safety would be a big issue today? If it is not BREEAM, very good, we're not taking the hotel. Are you having any minimum requirements? And if I reverse it, if there is a hotel that is, LEED, Platinum, BREEAM, outstanding, would you be more sort of keen, like, yeah, we really want it?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us here. So at Hilton, ESG is part of our core DNA, and it is one of our strategic objectives. And our ESG program, as was mentioned earlier by my colleagues, is called Travel with Purpose, and it connects globally all of our owners, all of our brands, and it is owner agnostic. So to answer your question, we connect with our owners and partners very early in the process of planning, and we share with them all the information that we have on Travel with Purpose, highlighting the areas where the compliance will be required once the hotels are operational. So one of them, we were the first major hospitality company to make sustainability a brand standard back in 2011, when we made reporting and monitoring of hotel environmental and now also social performance a brand standard using our Lightstay system, which is our ESG reporting and management platform. So all of the hotels have to report to it. We have about 95% compliance with reporting. And in return, we can offer owners information on how the hotel is performing, which will support their own environmental reporting. Question that was asked yesterday, can we provide carbon reporting from the hotel? Yes, we can. It's in Lightstay. We also have a whole suite of brand standards, which are ESG related. One of the most recent ones is full LED lighting within the hotel. So that's another one. We were also among the first companies, if not the first company, to set science-based targets back in 2011. And we have recently raised our ambition to reduce our carbon emissions by 75% from managed portfolio and 56% from franchise portfolio. This will define how the hotels will be built and also all the actions from the existing portfolio. On top of that, we all know that the customers are looking at it, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it later, and we've talked about it earlier. Yeah. So yes, and we do support our owners in getting external certification. because we believe that it does add investment value to the property. It helps with current environment of high utility costs, and it also brings additional, maybe not so tangible effects and values to the hotel. So yes, we do look at ESG when we look at hotels.
Okay. And related question to Ivaylo. You have been involved in quite amazing project in Norway. Who haven't seen it, it's incredible. It's kind of circle building on the lake. And this hotel will be fully net zero, carbon neutral when it is open. And it will be Six Senses, right? Was the fact that it was, highly sustainable, net zero, actually something that Six Senses or that attracted the operator? Were you able to leverage that to get, interest from operators or maybe in better terms?
I mean, I would say yes.
I'm sure you can share the details because of confidentiality, but yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, and when we first started, we didn't plan to be anyway branded in any way because it was very difficult location-wise, many other things, and our ambitions was a bit too high. To your earlier comment, I mean, one of the big struggles with Senses, both accreditation and with investors, was predominantly because we're too green and we're trying to be too ambitious and too innovative and all that. And so even for some hotel brands, although a lot of them were quite excited, we've been approached by quite a few, and when Six Senses actually came to us, I kind of felt finally we meet somebody who can understand what we're actually trying to achieve for various different reasons, obviously. But yes, our ambitions to be carbon neutral and completely off-grid within the first 5 years of operation and totally waste-free was one of the key elements for them because of their own ambition of sustainability and understanding as well.
Okay. Yeah. So moving to sort of financial impact and, Theodor, you are, in my mind, representative of the investors. You have your investment fund yourself, and obviously your representation in HAMA. You talk to lots of investors from the asset management perspective. So how do you or how do other investors assess sustainability features or sustainability aspects of the hotel specifically during the acquisition process? Where do you have some sort of minimum thresholds, or is there some checklist that you need to go through? And again, reversely, if there are high credentials, are you willing to pay premium, or do you think there is a reason to pay premium?
That's a very complex question.
Yeah.
That we have. I'll try to be as specific and brief as possible. But in short, given the regulatory environment that we are facing, that more of the funds are now being identified as Article 6, Article 8, Article 9 funds, which have different classifications as to which degree they need to adhere to sustainability and particularly ESG compliant issues. There is a different approach. But to give some examples, I think that's the easiest, is we just acquired 2 properties, which one was published, one was a very small one, a B&B hotel in Germany. And there also, this is a very, very simple box, so to speak. We would not have purchased had we not had the opportunity to change certain aspects from a technological perspective, from a maintenance perspective, but as well as from a lease construct perspective, meaning putting parts of a green lease into the provisions of it. On the other hand, us also developing properties ourselves and then being on the other side of the table, we try very much to get our exit partners to commit to a sustainable agenda which protects, you mentioned before, the asset value over the long run. So therefore getting the commitment that we comply with what at this point in time is a very loose EU taxonomy agenda, because only 2 of these objectives actually have been defined in detail with on some 24,000 pages for two objectives, and 96 economical objectives to adhere to them and to go along with us as we want to protect and at some stage also measure these CO2 emission, because that's the ultimate goal. As you have said before, you want all brands want to come to at some stage to a CO2 neutral or zero, net zero objective, but how to get there can only be in partnership. And because of the regulations are so loose, that's a very daunting task at this point in time.
Okay. Time is short. I'm not sure this is the right time. I mean,
It's maybe the old time.
yeah,
I think,
it's
like,
from the previous session. So I think we have to take it a bit longer. But Willem, as an architect, obviously you are facing difficult situation. You care about design, how things look. You have to balance as well durability of things against the price. And now, of all these kind of challenges, you have to take into consideration as well sustainability, right? So how do you deal with that complexity, and especially in the early stage, do you have some sort of financial assessment? Do you do it yourself? Do you have external parties you work with? What kind of analysis is being done when you propose, we should have a heat pump or we should?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's definitely become more complex because there's a lot of things to take into account. There's, for example, from Hilton or there's the request in the beginning, but of course we also should think, what will the building be like? What will it do in 10, 20, 30 years? So not only do we have to predict what it will do now, but also what it will do in the future. And I think that's a big change from how we designed buildings before, that we only made a building that does well now, but how can we do something that is ready for the future as such? There is certification like Bremen LEED. I guess we've heard those quite a lot already during the last 2 days. However, there's a lot of decisions to be made before that come much earlier and are much more essential in a way before you go into certification. What we do is quite early in the concept phase, we make kind of 2-3 scenarios, and we calculate the scenario. So, for example, if it's a listed building, or it's a retrofit, or it's a completely new build, or a resort, they really ask for a different strategy as such. So if you have 2-3 scenarios, we can, with a quantitative surveyor, so to answer your question, some of it is external, some of it is internal within the team. We check what is the best way to go forward. And that's not necessarily looking exactly at the emissions for that design, because there is maybe no design yet, or it's just a sketch. But we choose the right way forward. And then while we develop the project, of course, it moves into software, etc., and we can start to identify areas where we can improve and where we can kind of build in a feedback loop. And that's also something I think that most buildings didn't or still don't do. Provide feedback in a way, learn from the building, adapt, react. Then one final part is, so we do a lot of resorts. And the nice thing from resorts is that they're separate volumes of buildings. So we prototype. We built one earlier, and the brands call it a mock-up. This is much more than a mock-up. We try the theory, what the computer model said, does it actually work? And we add sensors, we measure. It's not only the architect, there's the structural engineer, there's the operator, the HVAC designer, MAP, etc. So we analyze like what went well, what went not well, what can we do better, before we build the other 120 units. So rather than copying the mistake 120 times, we try to do it only once.
Okay. So going back, I mean, similar question. You were involved in the Svart resort, 6 Senses, and I looked at the project, and it's incredible. There is lots of pioneering technology, lots of processes, etc., to reduce the energy and carbon and impact on the environment. And it got me thinking, how did you make all these decisions? Because it seems like quite expensive type of technology being deployed. What was the sort of underwriting? Did you do financial underwriting, or was it decision sort of prestige? We want this to be state of the art. We don't care how much it costs.
No, it was none of that. Actually, quite the reverse. I mean, the owners and the founders of the project are actually coming from the energy industry, and their whole ambition was, through their basically professional lifespan in the project they've been working on, the big issue they always had is how much heat or waste is being produced by any building or the building industry in general. And so basically what we started doing the project, the hotel itself actually happened by coincidence, in a sense that we were looking at how to build the most carbon neutral building there is currently in the market in order to provide all the various different technologies existing and new. And then the hotel became more or less the prototype of all that innovation and the ideas that we wanted to do. So to answer your questions, whether they're more expensive or not, actually in today's money, I think the price difference is quite marginal, very small. It's not a big differences, and actually building sustainably is not more expensive than bringing a regular brick and mortar, and that's a general misconception in the market.
Yeah, you understand. You all agree with that?
I completely agree with it, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if you say that it will be more expensive. So if you just aim for it will be the same price, just a better building.
Okay.
And that's where it is, and that also drove us to start looking into various different other elements, because it's very simple to look at sustainability as to whether you're going to do passive housing or solar panel, but you need to look at the full 360 economy of how this is weighed. And when you look at the hotels, for example, one huge element for us, or for me from an operational point of view, has always been the heat waste when it comes to kitchen and spa and wellness centers, but also the food waste. And how do we actually capture that waste and can we convert that into energy to help us to operate in the long run the hotels. So all of those technologies actually come part of the hotel operation and the building itself.
Okay. You know, we have been doing sort of, as a company, we have been doing ESG audit on hotels and helping owners to prepare for dispositions from the ESG perspective. And what we found is that, you know, the cost required to implement some of the ESG-related measures is actually quite high, and then savings, you know, you're looking at, if you're just looking at purely the cost of measures and the saving, you're looking 10, 15 years payback, which for investors is, you know, a lot. So what we found is that you have to start really including other factors such as, well, if you don't spend this, you have to spend still something because you have to put some equipment in place, or you have to maintain your current equipment and replace it in 10 years anyway. So you have to look really at the incremental, and then you have to include the potential impact on the value of the asset and potential impact on the revenues, which is where I'm coming back to you, Paulina, is there, have Hilton experience, do you have some data that you can maybe share or experience from specific hotel where, you know, implementing sustainability measures, getting accreditations, etc., had the impact on the type of the customers the hotel was attracting, or is there any statistics? I believe there was a survey that has been done that Hilton,
so
is there impact on revenue? That's my question.
I would say definitely yes. You've already shown some statistics on how customers are saying, I'm willing to pay more for sustainable operations. I would say in the last 18 months, sustainability definitely became on everyone's agenda. So we get requests from all areas, and I would like to quote, not necessarily our research, but I would like to quote Institute of Travel Research that looks at it from 3 different points of view. The first one is our team members and owners are increasingly from the millennial generation, and they care. And the team members are 3 times more willing to continue working for the company if they see a purpose in their work. With current labor crisis, that's one of the key elements to keep the labor in. The second one, our guests, again, are coming more and more from the millennial and Gen Z generation. And as we heard yesterday, they care as well. They are looking for environmental initiatives. Over quarter of them checks environmental credentials of the hotel before they travel. And then, yes, they do say that they are willing to pay more for sustainable offerings. Last but not least, and that's the group that has been more and more visible in the last months, are our customers, especially our corporate customers. 80% of our corporate customers already say that ESG makes part of their decision which hotel to choose. 60% have ESG questions included in their RFPs, and that number is growing. And 40% of them already have their own emission reduction programs within their own companies. To add to that, more recently, we have been seeing a lot of OTAs and a lot of corporates using external benchmarks, such as the Cornell Sustainable Hospitality Index, to see what are the carbon emissions of individual hotels, and then picking and choosing of the hotels that they could stay with. They're not going to stay in those 3 because their carbon emissions are too high according to what their internal requirement is. So yes, there is definitely an impact on occupancy. On one hand, it's positive if you have ESG credentials and that will translate into revenue. But I think equally important is the possibility of being a stranded asset where the customers actually don't want to stay with you because your carbon emissions are above benchmarks that are currently available. So yes.
All right. Anybody's experience, Theodor, if it's your hotels or within the asset management?
Yes, certainly. I'd like to also reference to what was said before and quickly here. But with our own reference, I'd like to start off with this one, is that other than hotels, the DNA of Value One, that's the other head, is really sustainability. We've done that for 10, 15 years. 85% of our energy is gained through geothermal use, meaning it's completely CO2 free, and the rest we are just buying CO2 free. Having said this, within our student housing product, Milestone, we have in the very first version, meaning the oldest of these, implemented, and this is the important part, in order not to fall into the trap of greenwashing. We have adapted, we have implemented sensors that actually allow us to measure. And it is this data, or rather the lack of data, that makes it very, very difficult and dangerous at the same time to commit to something on an energy consumption and equal CO2 consumption level that you actually cannot deliver.
All right.
And sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm giving the signs that the time is up. So just to kind of give a last word, please don't expand on it. Just if you can say one or two examples, just what do you think is in your mind the best way to reduce carbon emissions, water usage, or waste management in the hotels, especially from development perspective, and it has as well reasonable financial return on this. So just example and if
very quickly, behavior, human behavior, best practices, better use of controls. Also for the new developments, the team needs to be trained to work with even the smartest of buildings. Evidence, our first year of environmental program at Hilton here in EMEA, we reduced energy consumption by about 8% purely by behavioral changes and better use of existing controls because there was very little investment in that first year, mid-2000s, thereabouts.
Great example, very long. Short, just what would be your first thing to do if you were developing a hotel?
40% of all CO2 emissions come from heating. So therefore, you need to, at the building, at the construction, at the design stage, this is where you need to start off. What is not done then, you will never ever to be catch up. Yes, you're right, behavior is important, but there's only so much you can do with an existing
Willem?
property.
Well, yeah, you want the easy answer, and of course, life is never easy. But there's a lot of low-hanging fruits that we can take. Behavioral change is one because it doesn't take any investment; it's there to grab. But then you should always go for passive first, and only then look for high-tech solutions. At the moment, there's a lot of talk about apps, etc. But passive is good because it will last us 100, 200
so the heat
years.
pumps, stuff like that.
I find the heat pump even heat pump. You need
isolation of the buildings, etc.
Well, for example, reduce energy use in the first place, and then you look for where do we get that energy or the heat from, and then of course a heat pump is handy at some point. But in a lot of parts of the world, you could do with practically any heating or cooling by smart design.
Okay.
Well, in our case, we don't build yet, so it's slightly different. But I mean, one thing is we've done with the design is really look at the existing passive housing technologies and also being able to calculate through the digital twin and monitor how the lifespan of 60 years, and also be able knowing that we're going to be reducing basically the energy consumption with 60% over the period of lifespan of the building, but also local offsetting. I think that's a key for a lot of buildings because becoming off-grid or at least closer to off-grid solutions to most buildings is a key, and education behavior change. I think unless we change the consumer and their behavior, it's not going to change.
One thing on the behavioral, message to the operators: please do not change our towels. My towels was changed, and I'm really upset about this. Absolutely unnecessary after one day. So thank you very much, everybody, for great insights. Unfortunately, we had limited time, but I'm sure if anybody from the audience had more questions, we will be available either by email or call, because I think we all have to run to the airport. So thank you, and have a great day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.